where does the Seau family stand on the subject of hoping that Sydney will speak? Do they feel that if the pushing keeps happening, that Sydney is going to be able to deliver a speech just like everyone else at the Hall of Fame?
Yeah, no, I think that was the point of their statement yesterday. When I read what Jim Trotter had read, and he was frankly talking about what Dave Baker, the head of the Hall of Fame, had written on Saturday in response to the story that came out, I was surprised because everything the Seaus had been telling me was that they want Sydney to speak, and Sydney wants to speak, and Sydney's been working on a speech for several months. And has never been told otherwise until just a couple weeks ago that she wouldn't speak. So they feel blindsided. They feel like they want to keep her comments on Junior and what he meant as a father and as a player, and they've been very transparent in that way. So when they read that they agreed with the policy, I was taken aback, and I called the Seaus back and I said, "Is this accurate? It didn't strike me as such." And they said, well, actually, we're just about to put out a statement on this. And in fact, they feel like the Hall of Fame has started to speak for them, which has only made the situation a little more, how should we say, tenuous, I guess.
Well, Ken, so who from the Seaus are you talking to? There's the parents, there's the ex-wife, there's also the executor of his estate, there's a lawyer. To whom are you speaking?
Sure, I was in San Diego last week. And I sat down with Gina Seau, who's Junior's ex-wife, and Sydney, and we spoke for 3 hours. They told me their side of the issue. I had gone to the hall first in early July, and was just curious what was happening. I didn't know this was going to be a story when I started. Just asked them what's the ceremony going to be like this year without Junior, and they said, "Oh, we're only going to do a video." So when I started, I assumed the family was on board with this because they just explained that this was the policy, which they've maintained ever since. And when I went out to San Diego to speak to the family, they said, well, that wasn't our understanding. For 5 months, we were told we could give a speech. And so I said, really? They told me this is a policy. Yes, they just told us the policy, too. So the family felt like they were blindsided, and that's when it became a story, just really in the last couple of weeks. I never set out to write it this way. It just sort of happened this way. So I spoke directly to Sydney. The part of the interview was about the lawsuit that's pending with the NFL. That was in the original story. And, some of it was, frankly, very tearful. They were telling me about Junior's demise, which has been reported elsewhere. But it's still a very raw issue for them. Yeah, and I think that's where this policy diverges from the previous ones, where you've had guys who played in the 50s and 60s, and they died in a ripe old age of 80 or whatever. And here it's a much different case and a much more emotional issue for them.
Well, and I know about the rule that was put in place in 2010 and was enforced for the Les Richter family, Ken, and there was no uproar or outcry back in 2011 when that happened. And I know the rule being put into place because they wanted to keep the event as brief as possible with the ever-expanding amount of time that inductees were taking up at the podium, because I was the MC back in 2009, the last year where they did allow somebody to speak on behalf in a speech form.
That was Carl Peterson, and Carl Peterson's speech on behalf of Derek Thomas is on the Hall of Fame website, and you can see it's a long speech.
26 minutes.
26 minutes. So, and I get all that, but look, we just had Cooperstown. We had 4 players go in, and nobody watches the clock. I mean, this is their moment. This is their big shining moment, and frankly, what is the NFL Network cutting to, right? Or ESPN or whoever's covering the event. I mean, it's a night in August. It's not like there's a slate of games to be played at 11 o'clock at night on a Saturday. So, if it runs long, it runs long. I mean, there's other ways you could shorten a ceremony like this. So that's what I've always wondered about this. Like, I understand the impulse to try and tighten the ceremony, but what are you going to do? You have 7 guys going in, maybe only limit it to 5 guys in the future. Maybe that's one way around it.
Well, Ken Benson of the New York Times joining me here on the Rich Eisen Show. Just knowing the Hall of Fame folks as I do, Ken, and knowing about the rule that they put in place and why they put it into place, it would be a shock to me it may have happened, that in some way, shape, or form at the orientation that took place at the Super Bowl in February with all the inductees, that they did not expressly tell somebody on the Seau family that there's no speech. There's no typical speech that will be will be allowed to be given. Where do you think the miscommunication took place? Or unless you think there was no miscommunication, they did tell the Seau family something that they're telling everybody now that they didn't.
Right. I don't know the specifics of what happened back at the Super Bowl when these announcements were made. Sydney was not there; she was overseas at the time. But several members of the Seau family were. And look, there's a lot of time between whatever it was, January 30th or whenever the announcement came, and today, or like I said, this month, I should say, when these events have happened. And they claim that they had asked many times to various people at the Hall and NFL Network who was taping the video, so what about the speech? And nobody was saying, well, actually, don't you remember, you won't be able to speak. It was only when they got this notification on July 9th from the Hall that they were officially told. That's their side of the story. Look, I think the Hall has had this policy. Nobody's doubting the policy. But even if you set aside the argument of the policy, I think Junior Seau is a different case, right? And maybe there's a way to make an exception in this case. For somebody who died young and still has a lot of fans that are going to be showing up. Les Richter, played many years ago. I don't know how many fans came to Canton to see him inducted, but you can bet that Seau is going to draw a bigger crowd. His daughter's she's very well spoken, both she and Gina.
Well, I mean, Ken, look, I don't think this has anything to do with whether she'll be well spoken or Junior Seau is deserving of it. I mean, that's the heart-wrenching part of this whole thing.
Right.
But looking in your article, you've mentioned twice in each of your articles a date of July 9th. Pegging it to a specific date that you say the Hall of Fame told the family about this policy.
Right.
Was this a letter? I mean, where did this date come from?
It was an email to the family, actually to the executor of the Seau Foundation, who's been handling a lot of the logistics for the weekend, getting the family there and so forth. So that's when they were. Now, they, as you said, they may have been notified at the very outset when they probably received a packet from the NFL, or maybe somebody took them aside, back in January.
You mean the Hall of Fame, right?
The Hall of Fame,
not the NFL.
No, the NFL is really not part of this. I mean, right? I mean, technically.
Well, no. I mean, you read so many articles, they think that the NFL is absolutely part of this, and that's the reason why the Seau family's not going to be having a representative up there giving a traditional speech.
Sure.
Okay.
Well, anybody can draw their own conclusions, but Joe Horrigan at the Hall of Fame, as you know, I mean, he handles the logistics of it. They got a big staff there that deals with it. Whether somebody from the NFL told Joe Horrigan something, I don't know. But I'm taking Joe at face value. He's the guy who handles the logistics with his team, and they take all of the 7 inductees and put them through orientation and so forth. So there's many opportunities, and that's where the Seau family said, nobody ever told us this until all the way into July. So, look, there's probably a lot in the middle, but I think they feel like this is the first time they're really hearing about it is at this late date. And, as I mentioned, the emotions around it are still very raw, especially for Sydney, and that's the sad part of this. I don't know how or whether they'll backtrack. It's a whole other conversation, but right now they're in this tough position because you have a daughter who wants to speak. Now fans are getting excited in San Diego about it. I mean, Junior is as big as Tony Gwynn was to the community there.
No doubt.
And so, that part of it's made it very touchy. I mean, again, you look at the Baseball Hall of Fame and how they've had to wrestle with the issue of steroids. And here you have this issue of concussions with the NFL, and museums and Hall of Fames want to keep the two separate, but unfortunately they're intertwined, whether we like it or not.
What did the Seau family do, in your estimation, between now and induction weekend?
They're definitely showing up. They want to celebrate Junior. In fact, Gina said a very nice thing to me. She said, this is exactly where Junior would have shined, in front of the cameras and with everybody around. He was exactly the kind of guy who would have enjoyed it. And so we need to be there and do that for him.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern. On Audience.